It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology turned podcast. Everyone, welcome to the program. I hope that you're doing well today. You're having a fantastic Friday, and yeah, you're ready for the long weekend. I know Labor Day is coming up, and a lot of people are going to travel. A lot of people are going to, really get out there. And I know with the hurricane just having, left the states, and everyone is, still trying to recover from that, having really lived through a number of hurricanes. It's one thing I will say, and the news loves to cover how many buildings are destroyed, and they love to cover all the trees that get knocked down. They love to cover how much storm surge there was, and there's always some dude's boat that's flipped over on its side on top of a house. All that very catastrophic, but by and large, when a hurricane comes through, I've never seen so many nice people that live around me. They really come together. When it came time to clear trees, down limbs, just debris in people's yards, stuff like that. Whenever everyone was finished with their own houses, they didn't stop. First of all, the power's out, so really not much else to do. But also, everyone has a chainsaw. They all go to each other's properties. They make sure everyone's safe. Everything's cleared away. It's you think that much destruction, but in reality, from my experience, and I'm not saying every hurricane's the same, but when hurricanes come around after just a few days, the amount of willpower and community really clean the whole place up in less than a week, and life kind of gets back to normal as soon as the power comes back on. It's really amazing what people can do together. So everyone out there, hope that you're safe, you're doing well, and you weather the storm just fine. Everyone else that is everywhere else, I hope that you're doing well. You're keeping cool, you're keeping safe. And with that being said, we're going to distract you a little bit, and we're going to distract you with Ralph Bond. He's a great distraction. Not only that, he's just, an all-around great guy because, he comes to us every single Friday with 4 different stories, sometimes a little bit more. They cover everything that you probably haven't heard of because, let's face it, this week, if it's not a hurricane, then or someone forgetting to speak on cue, then you probably haven't heard these stories, and they're a lot of fun. So with that being said, computeramerica.com, that's where you'll find everything: past shows, future shows, show notes, articles, reviews, topics, everything. Links to our guest website at the top. It's like our third segment we have at computeramerica.com, a Ralph Bond whole segment that has his latest video as well as the show notes, which are super important. We'll get into that later. Now, with that being said, he's been waiting oh so patiently in the wings while I listen to myself talk. I love the sound of my own voice. But with that being said, let's go ahead and bring Ralph on. Ralph, welcome back on to the show. How you been?
It's great to be back. And it is true that tragedy can bring out the best in people, sometimes the worst, but hopefully the best. And that's a very great story. But in a week that's filled with natural disasters, human disasters, all kinds of negativity, what you and I do every Friday, as you alluded to, is try to bring you some uplifting science and technology advancements news. We look at things in robotics, medical technology, sustainable energy technology, transportation advances, space research, physics, you name it, all across the board. And again, our goal is to inspire you and leave you feeling good, which is a rarity these days when it comes to news.
Absolutely. And that's why, of course, the segment is our Science and Tech Trends segment with Ralph Bond. He's our correspondent for it. And a lot of these things are things that you will maybe not see today. And although some things, just last week we covered the giant sail, the antiquated idea that wind power was useful. The giant sails on boats. We just saw that come to fruition about a year after reporting it. So, some of these things you do see, kind of come back around very, very soon. But some of these twinkle in the eye, others perspective, but all of them are very, very interesting. So, Ralph, I think with that being said, I've talked too long. Let's go ahead and start with story number one.
Yeah, story number one. And my giant coffee mug you can see here is very appropriate for story number one. Here's the headline. Scientists strengthen concrete by 30% with used coffee grounds. What? I couldn't resist that headline.
Well, thank goodness, thanks to me, they have enough coffee grounds to do the entire I-95 corridor, so we're good.
me too, and I'll explain that later too on my case. This comes from Engadget.com, a story by Andrew Tarantola. And again, come out to computeramerica.com, get the show notes. We have links, pictures, additional resources for many of these stories if you want to dive in deeper, but here we go. So I love these factoids. Humans produce about 4.4 billion tons of concrete every year. Kind of not a surprise, but that's still something to wrap your head around. And that process consumes about 8 billion tons of sand. And in a moment, you're going to see why we're mentioning sand in this equation. At the same time, we humans generate about 10 billion kilograms, that would be 22.05 billion pounds of used coffee grounds each year. Coffee grounds, which a team of researchers from the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, we'll just use the acronym RMIT. So the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology University in Australia, these researchers have discovered the coffee grounds can be used as a sand substitute in the concrete production process that, in proper proportions, yields a significantly stronger chemical bond than sand alone. Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, it's so quirky and fun. I couldn't resist it. But here's the deal. Coffee grounds can't simply be mixed in raw with standard concrete, as they won't bind with the other materials due to their organic content. In order to make the grounds more compatible, the RMIT University team experimented with pyrolyzing the materials at 350 and 500 degrees Celsius. And that's 662 degrees to 932 degrees Fahrenheit.
Thank you for the conversions.
So I always have to do that. I was over my shoulder. I call out, "Hey, Alexa, what's this and that and such and so." Anyway, and then substituting them in sand, 5, 10, 15, and 20 percentages by volume for standard concrete mixtures. So they experimented with different proportions of the coffee grounds replacing the sand. And a side note, definition for pyrolyzing, that's to make or become decomposed through heating to a high temperature. Think of the root word pyro, like pyromaniac, fire, heat, so forth and so on. So that's what we're talking about. And according to the team's study published in the September issue, which is upcoming, or actually today, the September issue of the Journal of Cleaner Production. Talk about an obscure publication. You got to love that. 350 degrees Celsius is the perfect temperature to produce a 29.3% enhancement in the compressive strength of the composite concrete blended with coffee biochar, meaning the coffee after that high temperature treatment. Wow. And study co-author Dr. Shannon Kilmartin-Lynch noted, quote, "The concrete industry has the potential to contribute significantly to increasing the recycling of organic waste such as used coffee. Our research is in the early stages." This is a good example, again, of our trends focus for many of our stories every Friday. So she goes on to say, "Our research is in the early stages, but these exciting findings offer an innovative way to greatly reduce the amount of organic waste that goes into our landfills, where its decomposition would generate large amounts of methane, a greenhouse gas 21 times more potent than carbon dioxide." So again, if all these coffee grounds are going into the landfill, which currently most of them do today, they're contributing to the production of methane, or methane, as the British would say, 21 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Isn't that something? And here's a fun fact. Talk about your coffee grounds, Ben. Hang on to them. I use coffee grounds to fertilize my lawn, and the lawn loves it. And I put a link in the show notes, folks. Come out to the show notes. There's a link to a great little article about all the things in your garden that can benefit from coffee grounds. Here in the Northwest, we're big into blueberries. Blueberries love coffee grounds. So check it out.
Fertilizer has always been a big use of coffee grounds in our family.
Great.
I'm ashamed to say that, I only make like a pot of coffee like on weekends. So, normally it's the K cups, which I know are bad. I should use the refillable ones, but still it's, it's always going to be a trend that we see where you take something that is a complete waste, something that is seen as garbage, as, something that is made as a byproduct, and you take that byproduct and turn it into something useful. And that's where, I used to work in a chemical plant, and that was like, kind of where that chemical plant made its money is, they would have processes and they were told to dispose of the waste material of making, cancer drugs and making all these things, Ralph. And they would save the waste because first of all, you can't just dump it down the drain. You have to dispose of it safely, usually a giant incinerator. But the plant manager would take his team of chemists and take whatever waste material he had sitting around and try to figure out what he could synthesize with the waste and try to make something useful out of it. And that's always going to be a trend in science and technology and construction. Whatever is useless is a potential source of money and potentially useful in all over. I'm curious, Ralph, does it make the ground smell like coffee?
Not in my experience. By the time it gets out to my lawn, I keep it and I queue it up in a bucket that I have in the garage. And when it's full, the bucket that is, it's, a bucket, maybe a foot high bucket, and not huge. Then I go out and I just sort of hand toss it around the grass, but I don't smell any coffee smell. I wish I did. That would be nice.
That's unfortunate. and I'm also curious about the concrete. Do you think the concrete smells like coffee as well?
That would also be nice. It'd be like you could live in a Starbucks environment.
We already do.
Yeah, well, that's true.
As soon as they open that Starbucks across the street from a Starbucks in Times Square, we all lived in a Starbucks. That's how that went.
Yes, there it is.
So story number one and story number two. Let's go ahead and move on to ever since I guess the Learjet, from back in the day. Supersonic travel. It's pretty cool. Supersonic planes been around for a little while, but never really caught on. So hopefully, umpteenth time is the charm. And what's story number two?
Yeah, story number two. The headline here is NASA, and I think this is very interesting that NASA's the engine behind this, no pun intended. NASA moves forward with plans for supersonic planes that could fly from New York to London in 1.5 hours. Actually,
wouldn't that be nice?
Oh, insane. So this comes from Business Insider, a story by Marianne Guenot. And we've got the links and the pictures and all this good stuff in the show notes. Come on out to computeramerica.com and grab those notes. Here we go. NASA has determined there is a passenger market for supersonic flights on about 50 existing commercial flight routes today. And I'm going to stop for a second. The one thing that still makes me curious is I think it's great NASA's interested in this, but I'm kind of curious about why is NASA interested in doing something for the commercial airline industry? Usually NASA does its research and technology for its own research purposes, like developing technologies for the moon and all kinds of things, moon occupation, et cetera, et cetera. But usually it's not a direct commercial link. So that part of the story I'd love to learn more about.
Yeah, you're right. Usually when you think of NASA, you think rockets and space and rovers and that kind of thing. But I do want to say that a lot of our kind of weather stuff comes from NASA satellites, and NASA does kind of handle emissions testing and weather and stuff like that. So they do stuff for us here back on Earth as well. So not too far of a stretch.
It's kind of a curious twist, at least it was for me anyway. But going on with the story, it says here, with this application in mind, in other words, looking at 50 existing commercial flight routes that could benefit from supersonic flights, with this in mind, NASA has reached another milestone in its plans to develop supersonic planes that could take passengers from London to New York in just under 1.5 hours. Wow. The agency announced on Tuesday, August the 22nd, very recent, that Boeing and Northrop Grumman had been awarded contracts to develop roadmaps to make Mach 2 plus travel a reality. Okay, side note, Mach 2 is approximately 1,534 miles per hour. So keep that in mind. The companies, along with other industry partners, will develop concepts for planes that could reach up to 3,045 miles per hour or up to about Mach 4.
Wow.
So, Mach 2 is kind of the baseline here in this case, but the goal is Mach 4. Imagine 3,045 miles per hour. We could fly from New York to LA in an hour. I mean, what? Wow.
The in-flight movie industry is in shambles. You would not even be able to finish a single movie.
No.
Like the Barbie movie would be not even finished by the time you got to London. It's crazy.
No, that's true. And so by comparison, modern day aircraft travel up to roughly 600 miles per hour. So to put this into perspective, it's remarkable. And remember a little history here. The Concorde, a discontinued supersonic jet, the last flight was January of 2003, by the way, had a top cruise speed of about 1,340 miles per hour, or just above Mach 2. So Mach 2 is not a big breakthrough here. It's really that Mach 4 goal that's key here in this ultimate research. Little reality check, though. To make supersonic flight acceptable, especially for overland travel, it needs to become much quieter. To that end, NASA's X-59, developed with Lockheed Martin, has been designed to break the sound barrier while reducing the loud sonic boom, or so-called sonic thump. I think we are all familiar with that. This was the thing that really made the Concorde so limited. It could only do, if I recall right, over the ocean, transatlantic kind of stuff. It was not acceptable for overland because of the sonic boom thing. I think I have that correct. Little side note here, a sonic boom can produce around 110 decibels of noise. That's about the same amount as an explosion or a thunderclap, according to the NASA press release. And this is an important experiment because non-military supersonic flight over land, keep that in mind, non-military supersonic flight over land has been banned by federal regulations in the United States for more than 50 years. NASA said the X-59 was moved out of its construction site and is now being subjected to ground tests to ensure it is safe for flight. And the agency aims to fly the X-59 over select communities in the United States in 2025 to see if they find the noise can be acceptable. Now, late update here. The Business Insider article I've just quoted was published on August 25th. On August 28, it was announced that flight control issue prompts NASA and Lockheed to move the X-59 back inside for troubleshooting. And I've got a link for that in the show notes. So again, we're at the early experimental and testing phases of this, but I just thought it was so interesting on multiple levels that NASA's interested in commercial flight industry and the goal of Mach 4, which I thought was just like mind-blowing.
Mach 4 does seem to be a huge accomplishment when they get it around. NASA obviously has a long relationship with Lockheed Martin and Boeing, and of course Northrop Grumman as well. You're right. It's weird that NASA would kind of meddle in consumer flights. Although, Rob, looking at these planes, and you can see, the kind of sketch up here of the X-59. Right. This is not going to be what will one day be, available to you as a passenger. Right. It'll probably be a bit more, traditional plane looking with room for more passengers. I'm wondering, obviously, I could imagine for state visits, politicians, maybe the mega uber rich, Elon Musk has to be somewhere in an hour. So he has to be anywhere in the world in an hour. I'm wondering how feasible this do you think this is something that you or I will one day be able to kind of hop on, or do you think this is just for really special cases that they'll offer these flights?
Hard to say. I think you're right on target as far as, say, commercial flights go. You would have to have a volume of seating capacity and a volume of frequency to get the equation of cost of ticket down to where it could be attractive. And you'll probably see a hybrid world where you have certain supersonic flight opportunities and traditional flight still being
because
around.
that's what got the Concorde, wasn't it? I mean, just the lack of passengers that were willing to pay it.
That was part of it. Yeah. The sonic boom plus that was a big issue. So we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, clearly, if you look at this artist illustration here, that looks more like a fighter jet to me. And so you've got to figure the military part of this is going to have to be huge, I'm sure.
Yeah. Completely built for speed. This thing is, really crazy. And I know it's just an artist concept, but it's still, I'm sure it's not too far from the actual thing. It looks very, very cool. And, and unfortunate that they announced a flight control issue, which I think means the thing crashes. I can only imagine that's what that actually means with the update that you included there at the end. But thank you for including that. So yeah. Which, flying good is part of being a plane. So story 1, story 2, story 3. Let's go ahead and talk about paint and the exciting world of paint, because it keeps coming up. But no, it
does.
It's fun that something so simple and basic is having more applications, or at least added applications.
Yes. And, this reminds me of the first story today about concrete. Ben, you and I, over the last several years, you and I have seen time and time again, scientists figure out a new way to make a substitute for concrete, or scientists figure out a new way to improve concrete, and concrete. And then just this calendar year, I started seeing, and we started reporting about innovations in paint technology to help fight climate change. And this is another example. So the headline here is new paint gives extra insulation, saving on energy, costs, and carbon emissions. And the base story here is from Newsweek, a story by Robyn White. But I also went out to Stanford University's announcement. They're the source of this research for their announcement. And it's very, very helpful to look at both of these articles to get the full story. And there's a great illustration in the show notes from the Stanford announcement that explains the technology in part with what's going on. But little side note here, though. Back in July, Ben, we talked about how a team of researchers from Purdue University has developed the whitest paint on Earth, which reflects 98% of sunlight back out into space, with the goal of helping to keep buildings cool and reduce air conditioning energy consumption. So listeners, if you've been with us faithfully, you might remember that story. So this is kind of like a next big step forward in the paint deal here to fight climate change. So now the news is about how scientists have invented a paint that could potentially help replace air conditioning and heating while cutting energy bills in the process. Wow. Okay. The paint, invented by scientists at Stanford University, works by regulating a building's heat. And here's the thing that's a win-win: keeping it cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter. What's not to like about that? It's great. Okay. So the use of these paints could help act as an alternative for air conditioning and heating, as we alluded to before, which hugely contribute to global greenhouse gas emissions. I think we're all familiar with that. Based on experiments to date, the use of the new Stanford University paints, which come in a variety of colors, and we'll find out why that's important in a moment, reduced total energy used for cooling by about 21%. So the bit about completely replacing AC and completely replacing heating, I think, is a stretch, but it's certainly going to help cut down on the use of energy for that purpose. Right. And to study the performance of their invention, the Stanford scientists tested the paint in an artificially warm environment that mimicked apartment buildings across the U.S. When the paint was used on walls and roofs of the simulated apartments, energy used from heating and air conditioning declined by 7.4% over a year. So that's a little more reality here. Now, paints designed to help regulate a building's temperature already exist, like the story about the Purdue whitest paint ever made, but to date have only come in silver or gray colors, and we should add white as well, making them less aesthetically pleasing and therefore less attractive for use in the real world, right? Stanford's new paints, however, offer different colors, which is well shown in both the article in Newsweek and also in the Stanford announcement. To do this, the paints consist of two levels. One layer consists of infrared infrared reflectives using aluminum flakes. And the other layer is ultra-thin, infrared, and transparent, which allows scientists to use nanoparticles in a wide range or to achieve a wide range of colors. So that's the part that's really kind of great, which makes this much more potentially real for real world applications.
Right.
If you told your significant other, "Oh, I'm going to paint the house gray," and they're like, "What? No, you're not."
Anyway. As someone who lives in a gray house, I get it. I definitely get it. But yeah, and also just the fact that it has the two layers, it means that you could, potentially, I guess, last longer. You just have to worry about the one layer after application. Very cool.
Yeah, interesting. So here's some more about how this works. If a user wants to keep heat out, the paint should be used on exterior walls and even on the roof, because infrared light from the sun will pass through the colored layer and bounce off the lower layer. That prevents the building from absorbing the heat. To conserve heat, the paint can be used on interior walls. The same paint. Gotta love it. This then acts in reverse, where the lower layer reflects infrared waves. The paint will reflect about 80% of the high mid-infrared light, Stanford University reported in their announcement. Following the tests, scientists found that the new paints were 10 times more effective than others in reflecting infrared light. These paints can also be used on other surfaces. This is where it gets creative, because we think immediately about buildings and homes and office buildings and that sort of thing. That's very natural, but it can be used elsewhere, and your imagination is only limited by your imagination, right? So they say things like trucks and trains for the same purpose. Those horrible stories about people being stuck in freight trucks and, migrants being shipped across the border in these freight trucks and dying of heat because they get so horribly hot. Imagine if the truck was painted with this kind of stuff that would keep the vehicle much cooler, much more positive, and much more uplifting. Food, transportation trucks that have a lot of refrigeration. Maybe you could reduce that with this kind of paint on the top of the truck, and so on and so forth. So all kinds of possibilities to think about for the application of this paint.
Right. Yeah. It's not as whenever these stories come out, we always have to say that, no one thing is going to fix our problems, but it's yet another layer, dare I say, another layer that we can add to, make things just more efficient and better. It's all these things combined that will make a big difference.
Yeah. And here's a reality check. Again, this is indicative of the trends, twinkle in the eye kind of thing that Ben and I do every Friday. This is not, you can't go to Sherwin-Williams right now and buy this stuff. Okay. We're in the very early stages. So the last line of the article here, or one of the last messages, takeaways, is following the breakthrough invention, the Stanford University team will continue researching how to refine the paint application. And also, I would suspect maybe having a wider palette of colors and so on and so forth. So this is just a glimmer, a hope for the future. And I also want to get on my soapbox, as I've done so many times before, Ben, and you and I stress this. When it comes to fighting climate change, there's no one silver bullet, but a huge magazine. Ooh, that's kind of dark, but filled with silver bullets. Many, many things, many technologies combined will help us conquer climate change. And this could be one of the spokes in the wheel of that solution.
Yeah, no, it's really worth reiterating, because it's, people will look at something in isolation and say, well, it's not that good, so let's not bother. No, a lot of little things added together will make that difference. And and like you said, they're going to work on refining the paint application. The cool thing and the bad thing about paint is that if they can refine it to a point where they can get it to, maybe that base layer could be added to, maybe primers, and then the outer layer could be added to paints, and, everything just, things just kind of go on as normal. The closer they can get to a normal painting application, it then just, Ralph, becomes a no-brainer. You label your primer as outdoor insulating primer, and you label your paint as outdoor insulating paint, and you put on the two coats, and it, if it doesn't add much to the cost, if it's going to save you money, if the application's the same, like it becomes, okay, we just saved 8% on heating on every new building that we coat this stuff in.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. That's cool.
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's just all these things in combination. That's the great hope for climate change battle.
Definitely. So speaking of tradition of saying things in a certain order, story number 4 is something that Ralph tends to do, and we really appreciate. He likes to end our segments on medical technology. So story number 4 is no different. Let's talk about AI.
Yes. This one, I guarantee you, it actually made me tear up when I read this story. It's so great. So here's the headline. Artificial intelligence helps paralyzed woman speak for the first time in 18 years. Oh, my goodness. Also from Newsweek, a story by Aristos, Georgiou. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Link in the show notes, of course. A wonderful video also. Link to that in the show notes. Please come out and get, if nothing else, for this story alone will just really leave you feeling so inspired. So artificial intelligence is helping a severely paralyzed woman to speak again for the first time, as we said a moment ago, first time in 18 years. All right. Backstory. 18 years ago, when Anne, this is the woman in question, was 30 years old. So 18 years ago, when she was 30 years old, she suffered a brainstem stroke that left her severely paralyzed. She lost control of all the muscles in her body, and was unable to even breathe on her own initially.
That's amazing.
God. But the poor woman was still alive. Doctors, the doctors still do not know what caused the stroke, which came on absolutely suddenly like a thunderbolt. Well, Anne is now participating in research at the University of California, San Francisco, where a novel new technology is being developed. The system, described in a study published in the journal Nature, involves a brain implant that connects to computers and enables Anne to communicate via a human-like digital avatar on a screen. Now, if you're listening to us on a podcast only, please come out and see the video, get the show notes, come out to computeramerica.com, but I'll describe in words what's going on. You'll see Anne sitting in a chair, of course. She's connected to a system through a connection in her head. We'll describe that in a moment. And then in front of her is a screen with an avatar of a female. And when she thinks her sentences, the avatar speaks them. And it's just the most uncanny thing. You have to see the video. It's just mind-blowing. Going on, though, the brain-computer interface decodes Anne's brain signals and turns them into synthesized speech that a digital avatar speaks out loud while simultaneously recreating natural facial movements. Wow. So there's a lot of gear involved with this. It's not going to be very easily transportable and so forth and so on. But what a innovation, what a breakthrough. And you can just imagine where they can take this technology, miniaturize it, go forward, and eventually maybe even just have smartphones or whatever. But building on previous research, the UCLA team, the UC team, UCLA in San Francisco, first implemented a set of more than 250 electrodes onto the surface of Anne's brain. 250, wow, covering a region that is critical for speech. These electrodes intercept brain signals that Anne produces when she is trying to speak. They decode her brain signals into actual speech, as well as recreating the associated facial movements with an avatar. That's the part that blows my mind. The implant is connected to computers via a cable plugged into a specially designed port that protrudes from her skull. That part's a little gnarly when you see the pictures and video of this. It looks kind of Frankenstein-esque, but believe me,
but you got to get in there. You got to get a clear signal.
Yeah, exactly. And the benefit far outweighs, I'm sure, the discomfort and the appearance of this connection on her skull. So over a period of several weeks, Anne worked with the researchers to train, that's where the artificial intelligence comes in, worked with the researchers to train an artificial intelligence system to recognize her unique speech brain signals. To do this, Anne repeated different phrases from a set of more than 1,000 words so that the AI algorithm could recognize the patterns of brain activity associated with the basic subunits of speech known as phonemes. The UC the system at the UC team, the one they've developed at present. So the system they've developed today can decode brain signals into text at a rate of nearly 80 words per minute. 80 words per minute. This is significantly faster than her current text-based communication system, which can only produce around 14 words a minute. Imagine for this woman going from 14 words per minute to 80 words per minute. Wow.
Yeah, it's way more natural and much, not just the amount of information, but just, the types of interactions you can have are, night and day.
Night and day is right. And the University of California scientists hope their research could one day lead to an FDA-approved system that would enable patients like Anne, who are cognizant but physically unable to speak, to communicate more naturally in near real time. Wow. Applause. A++.
Yeah, it's really, and of course they're mixing some things that they really didn't have to do, which is, I guess, take the types of words. And if the way that I understand it, we had a guest on the show a little while ago that was able to take essentially text to speech, which I'm sure that they print out the kind of text that the AI is going to read out. And Ralph, they were able to take that technology and infer, kind of feeling and emotion from it. So, like when you're talking to a phone tree, the technology was able to kind of say, this person is bored, they can wait a little bit longer. Oh. This person is frustrated, so, we're going to bump them up in the queue. This person is really irate and angry. We're going to elevate this before we send it to someone. Yeah. Like, they were able to tell emotion. So I guess by mixing something like that with the AI in the face and stuff like that, you then get this picture of, obviously she's sitting right there and she's speaking, but then to include the facial features and structures while she's, while she's busy, making words, just adds a bit more of that human element that was lost because of the stroke. So mixes a lot of technologies. It's very, very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and looking at the image you've got showing on the screen right now they have this stylized kind of face.
3D face, avatar.
There's no reason though at all why they couldn't do a highly realistic deep fake of Anne's actual face and so forth. So it would look like her. So I'm sure that will be maybe part of the next wave of the innovation and the technology development.
Yeah, you're cool. Absolutely right. There's there are those creepy images of people taking like the Mona Lisa and making the Mona Lisa move and talk and do things like that. And that's just from one picture. Yes. Imagine if you inputted like 10, 20 different pictures, or even like you said, a scan, and you of course then have her looking at you, talking at you, making facial expressions through a monitor. And then, of course, make that portable, shrink it down. All of this is totally possible. And you're right. I mean, I'm luckily, not tearing up and I can continue the show and all that good stuff. But I got to say that this is such a huge step forward for, for people that are, have trouble communicating like this. It's, great research. So Ralph, with that I've started before, and people can go out and check that out themselves if they want more and see the videos themselves. Very nice video that they put out. At the end of the show notes, you have honorable mentions that we include. So let's talk real quick about the honorable mentions, and then we'll kind of lead out with that.
Yep. Another reason, please, to come out to computeramerica.com. Get the show notes. I'll entice you with some honorable mentions we don't have time to cover, but I just couldn't resist. Headline, revolutionary flying car. This is the year flying cars are getting so much attention. Anyway, revolutionary flying car that will cost $789,000 just started test flights from Business Insider. There's some fun pictures of this vehicle you can see in the show notes. It's a Northern California company. You can read all about that. The other one I thought that was really interesting as well. United Nations report, wastewater is a hidden solution to the climate crisis. Another spoke in the wheel of the solution. Talks about how wastewater could be transformed into energy creation and help fight climate change. Really, really good story. So check that out.
Yep, and that's actually way too loud. There we go. Okay. that's more normal. No, you're absolutely right. And of course, those show notes will be up by the time that you hear this. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find out more, and of course, we'll have them all included in Ralph's segment as well. Just click, go to computeramerica.com at the top, click Ralph Bond, and segment will be right there. And of course, we'll have a link to his site where, he doesn't just do stuff for us. He also does a number of other things, including AI stories and whatnot. That's more for the grandkids, but you know what? It's still a lot of fun to poke around Ralph's site and check out everything that he's up to. With that being said, Ralph, I want to thank you so much. And we should probably tell the next folks that I think we're clear, if I recall. Next Friday we're clear, but in the middle of the month, 2 weeks, you're going on vacation, which is great, love it. I hope they have a lot of fun. But then you'll be back, and kind of in the middle of the week, because then I'm going on vacation at the end of September. But yeah, things are gonna be a little wonky towards the middle end of the month, but don't worry, we'll be back with more Computer America when we can. So, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, have a great day. Thank you so much. We'll catch you next time. Bye, everyone.